The most recent development, to my understanding, and please do correct me if I'm wrong, is that Canada Post has put forward sort of a framework that they think could restart negotiations after last week the special mediator basically said the parties are too far apart for this to happen. What can you tell us about what's in that framework that you think will convince the union to come back to the table?
Sure, and there's some things in there that are still confidential to be, discussed at the table. But we've moved in a pretty big way on some major concern areas. One around pensions for the union in terms of what we offer future employees, people that we haven't hired yet. There's also some other moves on things like wages and that. There's obviously only so far we can go. But also, we're continuing to look for changes to our delivery model that allows us to deliver on weekends and things like that and bring on a better mix of part-time to full-time. Today, 95% of our delivery personnel are full-time. We're trying to add more part-time to that mix so that we can have the flexibility throughout the year to provide things like weekend delivery and also ensure that we're ready based on the volumes that fluctuate throughout the year.
So let me unpack two of those things specifically, because if I remember from our last conversations with both you and the union, that sort of weekend model was a point of contention between the two parties, how that happens, basically. And then also wages were very far apart. I think you were offering something like 11% over 4 years. They were asking for just more than 23%. Let me start with the wages. When you say you're putting forward moving on wages and that, what does that mean?
Well, we put that forward in a framework so that we could reignite the talks, and that is, for us at the table right now. I can tell you that we're nowhere near 24%. We simply can't afford that. With our employees today, over 70% are at the max of the range, which is about $30 plus $30 an hour. Plus, they've had cost of living allowances that we're not touching, but have been in the collective agreement for some time and have paid out over the last 2 years. So on wages, we'll continue to talk, but there's only so far we can go. But also, we've said we're not going to make major changes to current employees' defined benefit pension plan, to their job security, to the up to 7 weeks of vacation that they can get, and COLA clauses and all those types of things. So we're hopeful that there is enough there to move forward through a deal. But really, there's two sides in a negotiation. We've said, we're moving on some items, some major items that the union has talked about a number of times. And we're waiting to hear back from CUPW because hopefully they're prepared to move on some items so we can close that gap together.
And certainly, I have a negotiator here. I'm going to ask Mr. Gallant in a moment. But first, I just want to drill down into your contention around the wages. And it's nowhere near, I take your point that, you guys aren't going to negotiate in public here necessarily. But I guess I would ask, when you say movement, is it discernible away from 11%? And the challenge I would offer to your ask of you is that what the union has said is basically there are other things you can do to make up for your financial losses, like, for example, spend money on things that offer a return on investment, unlike the way they would characterize a lot of the spending that Canada Post has done so far, or executive bonuses, things like that. There's sort of the insinuation is that you are looking to recoup these significant financial losses on the backs of your employees.
I think if you look around the world at postal systems and what they've been dealing with, it's the exact same issues. So to suggest that we've somehow fabricated these issues with mail in decline and us losing parcels to the competition, this has been happening on a global scale. So, we're good, but we're not that good. So we just need to look at our future and say the reality is with our current delivery model, over the last 2 years, we have lost a significant share of our part of the parcel market because we can't provide the convenience or the value. So to lock in for the next 4 years with a new collective agreement that doesn't change our delivery model and it's still built for mail, that's going to have a huge and devastating impact on Canada Post because we're going to continue to lose ground to the competition. So it's about saying, we can preserve what our current employees have today. We can hire new people, full-time and part-time, with good offers. But we need to be growing the business. And in the delivery business, which is our core business, there's only one thing that's growing, and it's parcels. Yes, we can talk about a number of other things and other services we could provide. But if we're not competitive in the parcel business, we are not competitive in the delivery business, and that's what we do.
So if, for example, you can secure, movement from the union, let's say, on that model, and I think what you're referring to, and excuse me because I'm not an expert, but is this being able to deliver 7 days, right? Which I know has also been a sticking point. If you are able to secure concessions on that, can you not afford to not necessarily hit 24%, but pay them more in line with what other public sector unions are seeing as compensation in line with at least the cost of living over the last number of years?
We'll continue to talk about that. Our whole deal was premised on the fact that if we can get that new delivery model changes, then we can grow our parcel business and afford what we had already put on the table. We've lost a considerable amount of money over the last few years and continue to do so. And 3 weeks of a national strike at our busiest time of the year is certainly not going to help that. So, we're going to continue to negotiate. There are a lot of issues still to be discussed. The union still has a lot of demands on the table, and we got to work through that because we got to close this gap. There are still many Canadians that depend on the Postal Service. You're hearing story after story of people that are impacted by this national strike. We want to get back to the talks. We want to reignite them and close that gap, but it's going to take both of us to do that. We've signaled here's where we are prepared to go. There's only so far we can go, but if we're not looking to the future, if we just try and lock things in and just throw some money at it, we don't have the money to do that, and we certainly won't have it in the future.
I guess just really quickly, though, is that their fault, or is it the management of Canada Post's fault that you don't have that money?
I think it's the reality facing postal systems around the world that if you are not in tune with the customers that you serve, and it's a parcel-based world these days, then you're going to lose market share. We used to have 2/3 of the parcels delivered in Canada. Now we're down to 25%. That didn't disappear because we couldn't agree between us and the union. It was because we couldn't provide the convenience that Canadians and retailers are looking for. It's just a cold reality that if we can't provide the convenience and the value that Canadians want and retailers want, they're going to go elsewhere, and that's what they're doing. So we're saying, well, let's get back on that playing field. Let's try and build back our parcel business, and then we can talk about other things in the future. But for right now, we're at a turning point where if we don't look to the future and fix some things for the next 4 years while protecting what our current employees have today, then we are going to be in a lot of trouble come 4 years from now.
Mr. Hamilton, I'm going to leave it on that note. I appreciate your time, as always. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Vassy.